So I'm Isabelle Fajac. I'm a pulmonologist. I work in Paris in an adult CF center in Paris in France. And I'm also the head of the research and clinical trials committee of our network, the ERN-LUNG. So just to go back to my, here it is. So as you know all, well-designed and controlled clinical trials are mandatory to develop a new drug, and for a rare disease it might be quite challenging. So clinical trials network might help to solve this challenge, and it brings also many benefits for investigators, for sites, for patients, for sponsors, and we will go through all of them during these 2 hours. So in cystic fibrosis, we are very lucky because we have a learned society, the European Cystic Fibrosis Society, the ECFS, and it is very active. And 10 years ago, it supported the development of a clinical trials network. So now we are 10 years old, and we are very happy to share our experience with you. So the agenda today is now to begin with the story of the CTN, how it all began. Then we will talk a bit about the general structure of the CTN. Then we'll have an overview of a very important committee, which is the Protocol Review Committee. Then we'll look at the future and the sustainability of the network and how to maintain and monitor site quality. We'll also hear from a site and see what it brings to the site to be a CTN site. And we'll summarize with the successes and challenges. And so without further ado, I will introduce our first speaker, Chris de Buck. Professor de Buck is a pediatrician in Leuven in Belgium, and she was pivotal in the setting up and the launch of the CTN. She was the first director of the CTN, and she will tell us how it all began. Chris will just...
Well, thank you. If you give me the share button, I can tell you how it all started, because I indeed was the lucky one to be the first director of this clinical trials network. So I will tell you a little bit about the context, the aim we set ourselves in developing the network, some of the preliminary work that I think was very important in making it a success, what criteria we used for site selection, how we went about kicking off the work of the network, and a code of conduct. Our disease, cystic fibrosis, is a multi-organ disease. It's a rare genetic disorder, but within the rare diseases, it is the most frequent. So worldwide, there's at least 100,000 subjects with cystic fibrosis. That may be different for others in the field. When the disease was first recognized, it had a very, very poor life expectancy of only 6 months. When we started the network, that had already improved quite a bit. And you see here the age distribution of patients with CF around 2008. And the first thing you notice is we do have adult subjects, but it's mainly young adults. And the thing you do not see on this slide is that the burden of treatment for the patients is extremely high. So even if there's adults, it doesn't mean they have a great quality of life. Over the years, on the x-axis, there has been a steady improvement in median predicted age of survival. But with the discovery of the CFTR gene in 1989, there was the hope that we would really speed that up rapidly. And the pipeline of treatments had increased from just treatments that were symptomatic to treatments aimed at correcting the CFTR protein. Initially, it was thought that gene therapy would be successful, but that was quite a challenge. So now we're really very much into CFTR modulator therapies, how to get the defective protein active. And you see here the therapeutic pipeline in around 2008, and since then it has at least doubled, if not tripled. So our mission statement for this clinical trials network was bring new medicines to patients faster. We did some research and what is written in the literature. Well, to bring new medicines faster to the patients, you need sufficient numbers of patients enrolled in trials because many trials are underpowered and hence don't give an answer. You need centers who are experienced in research. You need well-designed trials. Defined criteria to evaluate the benefit of treatment, and, if at all possible, patients with a culture of research. Clinical trials networks could help. And what do you need for those? Well, they're critical for rare diseases. Every article on networks says that you do need a coordinating centers. Just doctors alone thinking they will do it will not work. They stress the importance of to critically review candidate studies and the importance of standardization of outcome parameters between the centers working in it. Also within the context of cystic fibrosis, we were lucky. We had a model. The Cystic Fibrosis Foundation had a therapeutics development network since 1998, so they had already been working for 10 years. And what they really stressed at every single contact with them is, please start small and then grow. Don't be over-ambitious from the start. Our preliminary work, what was that? Well, within the context of a framework program with money from the EU, we had Eurocare CF meetings. And we discussed a lot already on outcome parameters for CF trials. And we also did preliminary work on the design and conduct of CF clinical trials. We also assessed the feasibility. Would it be possible to build a network? Would there be interest from the CF centers? So we had a survey and we received 127 positive responses of centers saying they really would like to be part of a clinical trials network. And that included 95 centers with more than 100 patients. With that background information, we embarked on our mission, and we set ourselves 3 goals. First, establish a network of clinical trial sites according to state-of-the-art quality criteria. The second, to set up an appropriate structure supporting that network in the acquisition, planning, and conduct of clinical trials, that is this coordinating center, and the structure around it. And the third, to attract projects in cooperation with non-profit organizations, academic centers, and pharmaceutical or medical device companies. As to the first task, the network of clinical trial sites, what criteria did we put up? Well, working according to ECFS standards of care was one of them. Having the needed patient potential, children and adults, with a preference for sites that looked after children plus adults. Having some experience in clinical trials. Availability of staff, infrastructure, and specific measurement techniques. Having an own patient database, so you could quickly reply to questions. Institutional support, not just a doctor who thinks he can do it but has no support of his admin and his superiors, and being spread across Europe. We received 29 full applications and an independent jury of a CF specialist, a cancer research specialist, and a patient organization representative evaluated the applications. And you see there that roughly 50% of the points went to the quality of the center, 30% the experience in clinical, and 20% to resources for. 18 sites were selected in 8 countries, giving access to 8,000 patients with cystic fibrosis. This was the first wave of the network, and you'll see in later presentations that since then we've expanded already to 43 sites. Setting up the structure. There we really doubled or sort of mirrored what was the structure in the CFF Therapeutics Development Network, with a very important task for the coordinating center. But within the members making up the executive committee steering group, all the centers having an executive committee that would really steer how this network would go through, having a close link to all members in the steering group, and having a close link to the patient-parent organization, and really responding and replying and qualifying whatever European Cystic Fibrosis Society would want us to develop further, because they are really the initiative taker and the owner of the network. The coordinating center, that's where all the work is done. That's been decided in the executive committee, and they have a close contact with all centers, and they also have a close contact with the different committees that we set up to realize our task. Protocol review committee, very important. Training committee, because not all sites were equally experienced already. Standardization committee, working on standard operating procedures for all the outcome parameters. And then networking with other societies or bodies or governmental bodies like the EMA, that was felt very important, as well as thinking about how would we go with a data monitoring board. The third task then, attract projects in cooperation with non-profit organizations, academic centers, and pharmaceutical or medical device companies. Well, that really was presenting the network at meetings over and over again, so that it would gain knowledge, that it would gain awareness, that people would really know that the network existed. And there you have to be prepared to repeat, because it needs many repeats before you really are known in the field. We also actively contacted industry with specific folders. We reminded them, we contacted them proactively. And we also asked all sites to always refer requests for clinical trials to the coordinating center, so that they could then actively talk to the company and talk about the network. And also, of course, via patient organization. So creating awareness is very, very, very crucial. And then kicking off, well, we needed momentum. So we had 2 weekly telcos on a fixed date, fixed time with the executive committee. And the coordinating center always implemented the decisions that were taken. And that's where we could really proceed quickly. We also made sure that from the beginning, everybody felt involved. We had face-to-face meeting with the entire group twice a year. We had hands-on training at least once a year with the training committee program of the research coordinators working in the different centers, so that we also built a culture of feeling that we belong together. And we promoted that sites would have representation in at least one of the working groups. So really making sure everybody feels involved. And the thing not written on this slide is that we also proactively decided that we would lead the network, somebody would lead the network for 3 years, but then leave it over to somebody else, so that really there would be no monopolization of the network, that every partner really felt involved. And then a few words on the code of conduct. You had to preserve sufficient patient numbers to run ECFS CTN approved studies, because if you would continue to enroll your patients in your own research, well, then you wouldn't have enough patients left. So that was really extremely important. You had to agree to refer pharma requests to the coordinating center, so that really the network would do the work. You had to agree to participate in network activities, respond timely to requests from the coordinating center, and agree to confidentiality. Just so that you can read all our initial endeavors in a bit more detail, I'll leave you with these references on how it all started. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Chris. This was a very nice talk too, and it set the scene very nicely. So we have time for a few questions. Please use the chat box to write your questions. So I can begin, Chris, with all the committees. It appears that the investigators taking part in the CTN need really to give time, to be prepared to give time to be part of these committees and to make them really lively and active.
That's totally true. Being part of the network requires that you really are serious about it, not just something that you put on your CV, I'm a member of, but you really participate in the activities. Already attending the face-to-face meetings twice a year is a time commitment. If you're in the executive committee, for sure, having 2 weekly teleconferences and spending your time of that is really a strong commitment, but only that way the network can flourish. We have to say, though, that from the beginning, the enthusiasm was great, and everybody felt that they really learned a new job, how to properly test new drugs, and that's probably been one of the successes.
And was it obvious in the survey that was done at the first, the first survey, or in the application? Was it clear that a real commitment, beside taking part in clinical trials, a real commitment for working with the others would be required?
Well, certainly we made that clear with every output of the meeting minutes, because I haven't said that yet. After every executive meeting, every 2 weeks, there was also a report that went out to all the members. So there we could really reiterate whatever we wanted to do.
Perfect. So thank you. You are staying with us anyway, because you will also have the final talk, and the audience will be able to ask you some questions at the end of the webinar. So we'll move on with the second talk, and I think it's me. So okay, this is it. Yes. So I will go a little bit further and talk a bit more about the general structure of the clinical trials network. So here is the map. Here is the map, the current map of the network. So we've expanded. As Chris said, we had at the beginning 18 sites in the network. Now we have 43 sites across 15 countries, and we gather more than 17,000 patients. So if you want to get more information about the network and how it is structured and so on, you can go to the website, and here is the address. And also, if you have some questions after the webinar, or you want some more information on specific topics, you can send an email to this address. This is the coordinating center, and they will be very happy to answer you and to help you. So you've seen already this structure. As Chris said, we are working under the umbrella of the European Cystic Fibrosis Society, and the steering group at present is composed of the 43 sites. So of course, there is an executive committee representing this steering group, and the executive committee is working in close coordination with the coordinating center. The coordinating center implements all the decisions that are made, and there are also several committees, and we'll hear about them. So it is also very important to work with partners, and our major partner was our US counterpart, the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation Therapeutic Development Network. As Chris said, they are 10 years older than us, so they knew everything about clinical trials network, and they shared really very freely their procedures, and we mimicked them a lot. It's also very important to work very closely with patient-parent organizations, and we have one representative at the executive committee and some representatives at the steering group. So, more detail about the coordinating center. It's really pivotal for the network. They implement all decisions regarding the network. They are the point of contact for sponsors. They manage all requests regarding protocol reviews, feasibilities, contracts, and they also manage continuous contact with all CTN sites and with all the working groups and the committees. So they manage all paperwork, communication, reports, budgets. It's a very important role, and it needs a lot of work. So at the start, we had one full-time coordinator and one part-time admin. Now, of course, the network has grown, the activities have grown, so we have one full-time coordinator, one project manager, one part-time admin, one standardization committee coordinator, and one quality manager. But of course, as Chris said, it's important to start small, not to be too ambitious, and little by little, committees take shape, and you get more money also, more funding, so you can hire more personnel. But it's very important not to be daunted by the whole thing. Just begin small and grow little by little. So the executive committee, it is composed of 6 investigators. It's a mix of adult and pediatric medical doctors. There are representatives of the different EU countries, and they have a 3-year mandate. And among them, there's the CTN director, and of course, he chairs the executive committee. There's also one patient-parent organization representative and one CFS representative. And they meet by way of teleconference every other week on a pre-planned agenda, and the meeting minutes are sent to all investigators and patients' organizations so that really everybody is aware of how the network is doing. And of course, we also need to meet. So the steering committee meet face-to-face twice a year. There is a representative of each site and representatives of patients' organizations. And there we discuss action plans, we agree on action plans, there's an update of how the network is doing, what studies are running, and so on. And all, of course, an update of all the working groups, the committees. Chris has already talked about the code of conduct. It is very important. I have written some items. I think the most important one is that the approach, when a site is approached by pharma for usually a feasibility request, the site should refer the pharma to the coordinating center. They should say, I'm part of a network, and we only conduct studies that have been evaluated, reviewed, and approved by the network. And by doing so, of course, sometimes it seems that, well, I might lose that study. It might not be as well as I thought to postpone this answer to the feasibility request. But in fact, in that way, the network is made unavoidable, and the farmers get used to this. They know that they are going to have a protocol reviewed, and in the long run, they appreciate it because they get feedback on the scientific merit by academics. They got feedback on the feasibility by research coordinators. They got feedback also on how the patient feel about the protocol, because they have also a feedback from patients. And you will hear all about this by Lieven Dupont when he will talk about the protocol review committee. But it is really a very important point of the code of conduct. So as you see, there are several committees. We will hear all about the protocol review committee with Lieven Dupont, and I will talk a bit about the other committees. The standardization committee, it is also very important because when there's less variation in measurement of outcome measures, less patients are needed, and the results are more reliable. So we have written standard operating procedures about some outcome measures, and we try to harmonize them to have global procedures with the US network. And we also look at the implementation of these SOPs and to certify sites for certain outcome measures. We have also set up expert centers for CF-specific outcome measures so that they provide central analysis for studies. And it's also very important to provide an annual training. So we set up an annual training course for investigators and study coordinators on different topics each year. It's other talks or interactive sessions. And it's also very important to look at the quality, to look at the site quality and to maintain the site quality. But this will be the talk of Silk, so von Königsbruggen, so I won't talk about this. And we need to partner, of course. Our main partner is the US network. We have monthly teleconference with them. We try to have global standard operating procedures, as I said, but we also offer global protocol reviews for sponsor. That is one review at the same time by the US network and our network. We also cooperate with patient-parent organizations. As I said, there are representatives of patient-parent organizations at the executive committee and at steerco meetings, but the European associations also support financially the network, and we receive grant from the US Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. We also interact with EMA, we are part of the network EMPREMA, and we also interact with National European Clinical Research Network and with the newly founded Canadian CF Clinical Research Network. Communication is key. We have a website, we publish articles on the network, we also have newsletter, and we also have a brochure for companies, and we have also written some brochure for patients in different languages, because it's very important to build the culture of research among our patients. So there's a brochure on clinical trial, there's also brochures on how a drug is developed, and it's very important to build this culture of research in patients. So now about finances, how are we funding it, and how do we maintain the staff and all the thing that we need? So at the beginning, we began with 200,000 euros, half from the CFS, half from the patients, the European patients organizations. Now we have the same funding, but there are also revenues, because sponsors are asked to pay for protocol reviews and feasibility checks. We also have grants from the US patient organizations for specific projects. And about the sites, well, they do not get any funding. At the beginning, at least. Of course, they had more opportunities to run studies, which bring some funding, but there was no funding for site coming from us, from the CTN. Now, there's still no annual funding, but some awards were given with the help of the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation for some very good sites to hire more personnel. And there is a small support for filling out the metrics questionnaires, but that you will hear with Silk. And also we have some funding by the EU project, but this is a two-way thing, because it's some funding, but it's also a lot of work, and it's not always related. So that's about the general structure of CTN. I don't know what time it is. If we have, yes, we have some time for 5 minutes for questions, if there are some questions. So we are not as numerous as the way it was planned. So I think if you have some questions, and you can use the microphone, I guess. It's not too difficult now. No, everybody is very quiet. Okay, so then we'll move on, I think. Lieven, are you here?
Yes, I am, Isabel.
Okay, so I will give you the... So Lieven Dupont is an adult physician working in Leuven, in Belgium, and he has been the head of the protocol review committee since the beginning of the network. So he knows everything about it, and you'll see it's a very crucial committee for the network. Lieven.
Okay, thank you, Isabel, and welcome to our colleagues who are joining us for this webinar. And indeed, as has been explained by Isabel, the protocol review is quite important and has been instrumental in the success of the clinical trial network. And I would like to share you in the next few minutes what we want to do, why we want to have a centralized structured protocol review, how we went about and how we are going about in having this. Thirdly, why we feel it is important to ask the patients their opinions with regards to protocols of clinical studies. And lastly, how the process of feasibility is going on. Well, protocol review is important, obviously, because, well, we need a good review. We need a critical review, but it should be standardized with a certain, let's say, structured protocol used, and it should also be done within appropriate time constraints. The specific people who are specialists, not only in CF, but also, for instance, in toxicology or in statistics, need to be involved. We feel it is important also to know why patients want to participate to that study or not to another study. We also believe that it is important to have a centralized feasibility check, and I will explain a little bit later how that is organized, but it is quite important to have this. And then thirdly, it's also important to have an optimal patient inclusion in those protocols that are reviewed within the Clinical Trial Network Protocol Review Committee in the Clinical Trial Network, obviously. And it's also a prerequisite. Trial cannot be run in the Clinical Trial Network if it has not been going, or if it hasn't gone through protocol review. This certainly will improve. It's not only a belief, but it's also a fact that we can show the quality of the protocols has improved by the feedback that is given by the protocol review. And sometimes there's been a movement with the sponsors working together and improving the protocol. It's also important to determine which study has priority and which study that centers might prefer to participate in. And it certainly has increased the number of studies that have been done. And this is shown in this slide, which shows you in the blue bars the number of protocols that were reviewed from 2009 up till last year. And you see that we have now more than 30 protocol reviews, and also the feasibility requests that have been dealt with by the coordinating center has also increased. And it's striking to see that we have much more studies that we have done protocol review, but have not been asked to have a feasibility request, not as yet.
Lieven, sorry to interrupt, but the slides are not moving and they're not in full screen. Could you put them in full screen and moving them? Because we're still at the first slide.
Okay, I apologize, because here it was moving, so I thought that you could see that. Okay, we'll try again. We have rebooted. This should be the second slide, overview. Can you acknowledge that you are seeing the second slide, Isabel?
We see it, but you see, we yeah, well, it will be okay. It's not really a full screen, but
oh, okay. No. No. Take it quick. Okay, so this should be the slide with the. Can you see this, Isabel?
Yes, that's good. Thank you. It's perfect.
think we've lost the sound now, but we will manage. Okay, so like I said in the previous slide, the aims were to provide good protocol review, to improve the quality, to determine priority, and as a result of that, and this was shown in this slide, the number of studies that have been reviewed has increased from 2009 until 2017, more than 30, a little bit less, but still an increase in the number of feasibility requests that were dealt with at the coordinating center. Now, how is the protocol review done? And there are 4 partners that are important. Obviously, the sponsor, also the protocol review committee and the specific adoption group that will deal with the protocol. The coordinating center is very pivotal in coordinating all of this, and then the final decision will be taken by the executive committee. And on this slide, on this flow diagram, you see what happens when a sponsor wants to have a protocol reviewed. He notifies the coordinating center of the CTN, and then 3 things need to happen. Obviously, the protocol needs to be submitted to the coordinating center together with investigator brochure and additional data. In the coordinating center, a specific subgroup will be selected and will be assigned to review that specific protocol. And the members within that subgroup need to have specific confidentiality disclosure agreements in place. They also need to disclose potential financial conflicts of interest. And then thirdly, at the same time, there will be a contract, the discussion and execution, and the sponsors also need to pay an amount which is between 5,000 to 10,000 euros to have the protocol review. The sponsors also need to apply for protocol review, and they also need to mention whether or not the study has already been started, which is also obviously important, and they also need to acknowledge whether or not the study has been reviewed by, for instance, EMA or by the TDN. Then the specific protocol review process starts with the coordinating center sending out the protocol and all the documents and the review forms to the specific reviewers within that specific adoption group. And they have then between 4 to 6 weeks of time to finalize the review. They can score the protocol, they can use a certain form to fill in the evaluation, to give critique to the protocol. And then it's the responsibility of the primary reviewer to a little bit edit all of this into a summary review that will then be submitted to the executive committee, together with the scoring, the strategic fit that will be also assigned by the executive committee, and that will then be submitted to the sponsor. The sponsor can accept the scoring, the ratings, and then the trial can be run in the clinical trial network. Feasibility request can be dealt with, or the sponsor can perhaps respond to specific questions or issues that have been raised during the protocol review, and then the protocol review committee chair or the primary reviewer of the specific group can then see whether or not the company has adequately responded to the issues that were remaining, and then scoring can perhaps be adapted and revised. Luckily, we have since several years a nice website, a web-based platform that we can use. We get an email asking us to participate, and then we can, let's say, download all the documents from the website. We can also use the website, as you can see, to score the protocol, and the scores are automatically calculated from the different reviewers. And there are also open fields that we can use to evaluate and submit comments with regards to specific topics on the protocol. The individual evaluation is done unblinded. That means that all the reviewers see what everyone else has filled in. We use a specific, what we call critique form, to standardize and harmonize the evaluation, and we also use a certain specific scoring symptoms. The web-based platform automatically scores and calculates the average scores, and also delivers a sort of pasted document with all the specific individual evaluation, which can then be used by the primary reviewer to make the final consensus reports, and that can be used to edit all of this. This is the first page, the heading of the protocol review template document that we are using. And in fact, we need to review the protocol with regards to 8 specific topics. The scientific rationale and a number of specific questions can be used to organize a little bit your thoughts or your evaluation. Preclinical data, for instance, is there sufficient data to support that the study will be done? Is the preclinical package complete? Perhaps initial human trials that are available, and study feasibility. Then the 5th topic is study visits and procedures. Is it problematic for enrollment? You can see the different questions. 6th is the study design, the scientific merit of the research design, the endpoints, are they appropriate? Is the protocol well written, and does it answer the aims of the study? Is it the right study to be doing? And then the patient population with regards to in- and exclusion criteria. And lastly, the statistical plan, is it appropriately and does it address the aims of the study? Scoring is done firstly with regards to the scientific value, and there are 3 subtopics: scientific merit, feasibility, and study design. And there are for each subtopic 5 questions that we need to score. For instance, you can see here scientific merit. Does the scientific rationale justify development of this drug device? And we need to score that between 0 to 4. And you need to do all of that. And then we also need to score the strategic fit. And these are 5 different subtopics: applicability. And then you have a number of suggestions. Most of CF patients will be able to use the therapy, then it scores a 4, or the therapy is limited to a small subset of the population, and then it will only score 1. Applicability, but also health impact, quality of life, needs to be scored. Thirdly, is it a novel mechanism of action, the likelihood of success of the trial, and does it fit with the ECFS strategic priorities? And in the end, finally, the executive committee, on the basis of the evaluation, the final report, and also on the basis of the scoring by the protocol review committee, will assign a sort of strategic fit ranking, which means that the study has high, medium, low priority, or some studies may be deferred temporarily because there are remaining key issues or concerns that need to be addressed by the sponsor. There are different review groups. We're quite fortunate to have 6 adoption groups. Each of them consists of at least 6 members. There's a primary reviewer who is the group chair. There's a secondary reviewer who can replace the primary reviewer. There are additional reviewers, 2 or 3 medical, 1 or 2, and most often 2 research coordinators, 1 statistician. And there could be additional ad hoc members, for instance, a basic scientist, a toxicologist, a GI specialist for specific clinical trials protocols. We use both junior and senior PIs in these groups. We use a little bit a mix from all over Europe, and it's a nice combination of the expertise that is available within the clinical trial network. All these members are temporarily assigned. Well, most of them have been assigned for an indefinite period because we really need their help in reviewing all of these protocols. There are also 2 patient reviewers that are reviewing the protocol, and this is quite important. We feel that the input of the patient is certainly something that is needed, and the sponsors also really appreciate that, but it's not evident for all patients to review a specific clinical trial protocol. It might be difficult. And how do we go about to do that? Well, obviously the protocol is provided to the patient reviewers, but we also have a list of specific questions, 7 questions, that the patient needs to answer. So they can read what they need to read to be able to answer that question. The patient review is done separate from the protocol review committee, and it is not edited, also not by the primary reviewer, and it is transmitted as such to the sponsor. To be able to have adequate patient reviewers, we also obviously provide assistance to these patient reviewers. Some of them have some background knowledge. They have, let's say, been trained in science or in perhaps some medical topics. They receive from us an important information leaflet detailing how the modus operandi is, what they need to do, what their task is. Obviously, they need to also be able to give confidentiality disclosure agreements, and all of them underwent a specific training, face-to-face training, detailing them a little bit, why clinical studies are done, how they are done, what they need to be aware of, and what the points of attention are. And then we have instructions on this specific list of questions. And there's a possibility, it hasn't been done, I believe, or not quite often, to have a teleconference between the patients and, for instance, the primary reviewers, if they have specific questions that they cannot understand from the protocol. So we let's say we are available for the input if they need it. Leaflet that is sent to the patients, and this is the questions that they need to answer. First question is, do you have concerns about the study design? And as you can see, then we explain what we mean by study design. Second question is, if the study was a placebo-controlled study, do you think it will have an impact on the willingness of patients to enroll? Third question is, does the burden seem to be acceptable? Fourth question is, do you think that the proposed benefit outweighs the intervention, the burden of the study, and the potential risks of the study? Fifth question is, do you think that the eligibility requirements are reasonable? Sixth question is, if you were eligible or your child, would you be willing to participate? And then the seventh question is just an open question where they can detail specific points that they have regarding the protocol. Last topic is the feasibility assessment, which as I said in the beginning, is also centralized, and it's quite important. It's important to avoid what most of us know from other diseases, that is that a sponsor submits a feasibility request directly or to a contract research organization to the center, and then the center replies. Well, within the CTN, this is centralized to the coordinating center. And so, in fact, if an individual center is approached by a sponsor, then they need to refer the sponsor to the coordinating center. The coordinating center can even help with the design of feasibility questionnaire, because some of the questions have been already asked, whether or not you have the specific equipment. That is something that you do not need to fill in every time. That is information that can be kept on file. And then the coordinating center sends questionnaires to the centers selected by the sponsors and consults with the PIs of those centers to be able to collect all the data, the feasibility within those specific individual centers, and then an accurate count of all the patients within the clinical trial network that may be eligible for the study can then be provided to the sponsor. And the sponsor can also, if they want, consult the CF registry for specific questions. And then also it's important to optimize recruitment. We feel strongly that CTN centers should agree to preferentially, and I added a little bit, I think it's important solely to perform trials selected by the CTN with sufficient priority scoring and have been reviewed by the CTN. And I think that it's also interesting for sponsors because all those centers are of high quality, and it is also optimized quick and efficient patient inclusions in the chosen trial. So I think it's a win-win situation both for the centers and the sponsors. And the centers also, well, the CTN, the coordinating center, counts the number of patients that are recruited in the individual centers and thus provides feedback to the specific individual center. And you can see how many patients were recruited in the same study by your colleagues. And this results even in a sort of quality report that you can then receive. But finally, it's important to remember the CTN is not a contract researching organization. Everything else from there, the running, the follow-up of the study, obviously remains the responsibility of the sponsor or the CRO and the principal investigator. So thank you for your attention. I'll leave you again with the website of the Clinical Trial Network, and I'm available for questions. And I apologize again for the technical problems in the beginning.
Thank you, Levin. No problem. No, oh, there's feedback. No problem. It was fine. Don't worry. So I think you've shown very nicely the work of the protocol review committee and the importance of the feasibility centralized by the coordinating center. We have one question from Colin. It seems a lot of work is done that would otherwise be done and coordinated by the pharmaceutical company or its representative. What is the advantage of your free centralized approach?
Well, the main advantage sorry, there's a little bit of echo. The main advantage is that in fact we now receive the protocols quite early in the design, and we can really adapt the protocol in this early stage, and we can avoid that the company, for instance, makes mistakes or has certain interests within the protocol that are not our interest. So it's quite important to have this, let's say, good interaction with the companies. We can even now see that sometimes companies even send in protocols which are even not really sufficient enough to be reviewed. So I think it's a good evolution in the end, and I think that we will evolve from protocol review even to protocol assistance. And I think that that's an important task also in the future for us.
Yes, and it's true that usually companies ask for advisors in the academic world for the protocols, but with the review of the committee, it's really better balanced, I think, and the feedback for companies is really about the scientific merit and also what is feasible, because sometimes farmers don't understand that the protocol they want to, there's no patient for them for the protocol, or there's no patient, no real patient for the protocol, or it's not doable in the set of the clinics. So I think that's really a feedback that is very important for the sponsors.
Yeah, I agree, Isabel, and especially if you're, let's say, the principal investigator working with the sponsor, then you can only advise. But if you have a review with the protocol review with the CTN, then you can really stop the protocol if you're not happy about it. So you can really have more power and are able to change, if needed, the design of the study. So I think that our input is really worthwhile.
We have another question, which is among the studies reviewed by the ECFS Clinical Trials Network, what is the average number of the 43 sites that participate in each individual study?
Well, that's a very specific question, so I do not have the calculation of that, but I have seen, at least for protocol review, that we have input from, I would even say, let's say 60–70% of the centers, and there's certainly there's a need, and perhaps also there's an opportunity for other centers to participate, but also brings along some work for the specific center that wants to participate, and it all depends on the willingness of the individual centers.
And I think we'll talk about this later, but it's also difficult because, of course, it depends whether it's a phase 2 or phase 3 study, how many sites need to be involved, how many sites the sponsor wants. And it's also difficult, we'll see this in the last talk, because it's difficult still for us to have a say in proposing sites and countries. Usually sponsors and CROs have their own ideas about which countries they want to involve. We have another question, which is, how do you work with EMA for awareness of the need of involving patients from the beginning?
Well, I have no dealings directly with the EMA. I hope that they are aware of what we are doing, and well, it's not involving patients in protocol review. It's not something that we need to do just for the sake of the health authority or the EMA. I think it's just the logical thing to do, and sponsors really appreciate the input from the patients very much.
Yes, EMA is aware of this because we are part of the Amprema network, so they knew when we decided to have the patients reviewer, they knew it, and they were really happy about this, to involve patients to review protocols. And it didn't interfere. Any other question? Well, The answer is, would it be better to make EMA a partner too? But EMA would not want to be involved in the protocol review per se, but they usually, what we are told is that when sponsors go to them to have advice, they are asked if the protocol was reviewed by the network. So they are very interested in having the feedback of academic experts. Do you have some, do you want to add something, Niven?
No, I'm happy with that. Thank you, Isabel.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Niven. Now we are turning to sustainability, looking at the network for the future. So looking at site quality, how to maintain site quality, how to monitor it. And this will be a presentation from Silke von Königsbruggen. Silke is a pediatrician. She works in Köln in Germany, and she's also the current CTN director. So Silke, I will give you the...
Can you see it? Can you see this first slide?
Yes, no problem. Please put it in full screen and it will be perfect.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the nice intro, and whoever is there. The topic I will present is to focus a little bit on quality management and sustainability of the network, and also show you some examples how we do site evaluation and study performance, and also evaluate the responsiveness. So this is a nice graph which shows how the number of studies have increased during the last years. And one important point is that Chris already mentioned, is to start slowly, establish the network, establish the quality, and then slowly expand by keeping the quality, and then from there improving it further. So it's always important also first to keep the quality. So why does it matter? And this is the aim of our network, to intensify the clinical research in the area of CF and to bring new medicines to patients as quickly as possible. And this is strongly linked to quality. So if you look at the main stakeholders, it's the course. They expect safe and effective medicines as soon as possible, and also want to experience a good, or gain a good clinical trial experience in an experienced site, which is keeping up the quality and working according to SOPs, especially for the outcome parameters. And they also want a smooth performance of trials and not any repetition of any outcome parameters, because there's not the standard level of quality. So on the other hand, there's pharma. They would like to reach the marketing authorization also as soon as possible, but also want to have a very fast enrollment and also an excellent performance according to GCP standards. And if we look at the site research teams, they also have expectation to quality. They want to be selected by sponsors, and they want to have good quality and feasible studies. So for quality, what do we do? And this is on different points. Lieven has shown a very nice overview about the protocol review, how we improve quality and feasibility, and also evaluate which benefits our patients would get out of the protocol review. But we also judge the practicality for our trial sites. And as also Isabelle Fajac has shown, the standardization committee is of a great importance, because they standardize the outcome parameters. And for many outcome parameters, we are offering central reading facilities, and we perform certification for these outcome parameters in the different trial sites to assure these outcome parameters are really performed according to high quality standards. And this is very important, as Chris has already mentioned, to also reduce the fluctuations in these results, and by that we can also reduce the numbers of patients needed for clinical trials. We collect site metrics of study conduct via a computer system, and I will show you some examples in the following slides. We also provide annual quality reports, and we personalize them to each site. And it's also applied in an anonymous way. Then we have twice yearly quality sessions at the SteerCo meeting, where we present those quality items we have evaluated, and there's also a training session of PIs and research coordinators where we can focus on some of those items. So we have a trial management. It was established in the year 2012. For the first 3 years, we worked with fax-based collection of metrics, and now this is much more comfortable. We asked the sites to put in data quarterly, and then we can produce the quality and performance report. So I can show you some data from the last report. A quality manager is beneficial. When we started our net and have a special quality manager, and since we have this luck to be able to employ a quality manager, we have more robust and detailed metrics. And also the quality report has become more detailed with many more graphs and also a higher variety of evaluations. It can help sites solve problems when they are flagged by these metrics, and it can also facilitate competitive renewal, and I will come back to that point later. So we can evaluate different variables like enrollment. This is really important. Number of patients, also the proportion of included patients compared to the CF population in the different sites or countries. And we also weigh the studies for complexity. This all with the aim to accelerate research. We also evaluate the time to site activation, the response to feasibility requests, and want to gain real accurate metrics via the TMS response. So how to use the quality results? And first, for our CTN sites, it's nice to identify areas of excellence to motivate, and nearly all the sites have a very high level of quality and excellence. But we can also identify areas which need improvement or training via these metrics. We can compare the performance against other sites, and we can also decide on how applying resource allocation, or use it to demonstrate the performance to institutions, and maybe thinking very positively to receive more funding for performing the clinical trials. For the CTN as a network, we can see how we best can manage the network capacity, but we can also look at high performers and learn from them. And on the other hand, identify lower performers and try to provide them special support for improving the quality at their site. We can identify training needs and take them into the training, into the yearly training sessions. And we can also use these metrics to optimize CTN procedures. So in the following slides, I would just like to show you some examples. The contents of this quality report first is a at a glance page. And if you look at the infographics, they look very eye-catching. And we just want to reach a high level of interest to really look into this report in detail. Then it's followed by a foreword to motivate the sites, a short introduction, which metrics have been evaluated, and some background explanations. And for quality metrics, we look for the quality of the studies, enrollment, the setup, the feasibility, and also the TMS response in general. And at the end, the methods are also clearly explained. So with the forward, it's really to motivate the sites to keep the high quality, like it's written in the text, but also to further improve quality. The quality report, which you can see on the right side, it's distributed to the special CTN sites, but in an anonymized way, so they only can see their own quality metrics, but can benchmark it to the rest without seeing the other sites mentioned. So the first part is about the network as a whole and gives us some background information. So this is a slide showing you the enrollment for the clinical trials being performed in 2017 in our network. So it were mainly adults, but also the population of adults and pediatrics or pediatrics only. And then you can see the most studies were performed as phase 2 studies in the field of CFTR modulators. So this always gives us the yearly evaluation. And then this is a slide where we could see the studies on the left, but for confidentiality reason, we cannot show that. But then you can evaluate the sites per study, and you can see that this study, 32 sites were participating, and there are also studies which are performed monocentrally. And we can also see how many patients were enrolled per study. So these are really large studies. And then we also have studies where a lower amount of patients are included. So this gives us always very interesting overviews from which we can work further. And this is the number of studies by country. So where we analyze, also for confidentiality reason, we are not showing the countries, but we can see how many studies were performed in the different countries. We can also compare it to the patient population of the CF patients in that special country. And we can detect countries with little amount of studies, and then can ask sponsors to go to this country when they plan their next clinical trials to balance a little bit within the network. And this is an overview we then see with all the clinical trial sites, and we mark with an asterisk the special site where the quality report goes to. So this site can see and benchmark itself against or towards the other sites. And then we also provide, so this is also the number of studies, but we also evaluate the study for complexity to look at how long the studies are as far as duration is concerned, or how complex the outcome parameters are. And then we give the site also the position. So this site has position number 16 out of 43 sites. And for the complexity weight studies, it's position 15 out of 43. So for each quality metric, they can benchmark themselves. And this is a nice overview showing how many adults were enrolled in the different sites and how many pediatric patients, and also very interesting to see the screen failures in the different sites. And there are sites with a really high number, and there are sites with a really low number. And for sponsors, it's also important to see the under-enrollment and over-enrollment. The good thing is that most of the sites have enrolled exactly the number they have given this to the sponsor in the beginning, but we also have sites with under-enrollment and over-enrollment, and this is also important to know for the quality of the network. And then we evaluate the percentage of enrollment compared to the patient population in that site. Not only the number of studies or the number of patients, but also the percentage of compared to the population. Another important quality metric is the time it takes to set up a study and to enroll the first patient. So this is an average of all the items in the network from the time point when the regulatory package is received to the positive ethic approval, when the contract is in place, when you receive the go and screen the first patient until you enroll the first patient, and then you can also look at those in the different sites. We also look at how many feasibility requests the different countries receive, and then also talk to the sponsors to also go to countries who are less frequented for the trial proposals. And the last important point is the response. So all the sites receive an email and a time interval to put in the data into the TMS. And as you can see, most of our sites have a wonderful compliance of 100%, but there are also some sites who are not performing as well as good as well as the other sites. And like Isabel Faschak has mentioned, we have a small financial compensation the sites receive for putting in the data. This is started 2 years ago. So since then, the compliance went up, and most of the sites show compliance of higher than 90%, which is really excellent. But this is very important if we evaluate the quality to really receive all the data from the sites. And the last point is competitive renewal. So if we look at factors that could block activity, one factor could be that the sites are not approached or selected by sponsors. So this is the point where the network can help. But there are also other factors like lack of capacity or training, or maybe lack of motivation. So for the first time in the 10th year of the network, we have applied a support program. And first, we looked at the sites which had less than one trial during the preset time interval, or have included less than 3 patients. So this is really a very low study performance. So we started last year, and we invited the sites to enter then a 12-month support program. And this was really tailored to the site, where the quality manager started with telephone calls and also an online survey to find out about the difficulties in the individual sites, discussed these difficulties with them, informed them about the competitive renewal, what the background is. And after receiving the survey, there took place especially quality improvement items and a program like EQUIP-CR, which is a quality improvement program, very time consuming, but with excellent parts to improve the quality performance in the trial sites. And also we as CTN help the sites to improve the response to feasibility questionnaires and look at details. We trained the staff and also looked at different certifications, if they are all in place, helped with procedures in those sites. So we also encouraged sponsors to proactively approach those sites and give them a chance to improve within the performance of the network. So this support program ended this September, and the result was that luckily around 1/3 of the sites could be retained in our networks, and we had to ask around 2/3 of sites to leave the network. So this was the application of the first competitive enrollment to prepare for the next expansion, where the application period has finished in October this year, and then we prepare the sites for participation in our network by January 2020. And finally, I would like to thank the current CTN team, the coordinating center in Leuven, Verle, Anne, and Katja, and Fiona, who is our quality manager and has performed all the different graphs for the quality items I've just shown you. And if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at any time. You can see our email below, and I thank you very much for your participation.
Thank you, Silk. Thank you very much for this overview. I just want to be sure everybody understood that when you said 1/3 of the sites remained and 2/3 of the sites were asked to go out, it's the sites that were identified as having some quality issue, and of course not all the sites of the network. I'm not sure it was quite clear. So it's the sites that were identified with recruitment issues or participation issues, they represented how many sites of the network?
Yeah, that's an important point, Isabel. Thanks for the clarification. Yeah, this we identified 13 sites at the beginning with the low performance, and 11 sites entered this trial support program. And some of those sites, or most of them, were sub-sites of other sites. So it's not the number out of the 43 sites, but they were some sub-sites of the still existing sites. Yeah, that's important to clarify.
Yes, because maybe we should also say that at the beginning, for the first wave, we accepted application from sites that had grouped themselves together. They said they worked together and did clinical trials together, were used to work together. So they were what we said composite sites. In fact, it was not that easy, and it didn't work very well because the communication between all these sub-sites or these composite sites was not going very well, and this what we call sub-sites, where some of them were in difficulties and evaluated. Is there any question for Silk? Okay, well, so thank you, Silk, and now we'll hear the view of a site. So I'll just Olaf, yes. Okay. So Olaf Eckmeyer is a pediatrician. He works in Frankfurt in Germany, and he will give us he belongs to the CTN, of course, and his site belongs to the CTN, and from the beginning, and he will give a talk on what it brings for a site to be a CTN site. Thank you, Olaf.
Thank you, Isabel, for this kind introduction. Hopefully everyone can see my first slide. Just have to minimize this. My name is Olaf Eckmeyer. I work at the Christiane Herzog CF Center in Frankfurt. This is a center where adult physicians and pediatricians work together. You can see also in this picture the ERN network coordinator, Thomas Wagner, and Christina Smatzny, the adult physician taking care of the CF patients. So at our center, we have 230 CF patients. Most of the patients are adults right now. That's usual for all those other centers in Europe as well. So what does it mean for us to be a part of the clinical trial network? So please consider this as a personal view of our side. So that was my topic. So first of all, it's very important for easy communication. So through a strong network, communication with pharmaceutical companies, with partners within the network and outside the network is more easy. So Silke and Isabel and also Chris de Boeck already told us that this network is a powerful communication medium. We enjoy benefits from emails, telcos, or webinars like this webinar. So maybe you now think about what are the benefits from emails, because we get a lot of emails, but I can tell you there are regular conferences, telephone conferences, where people from the steering committee put a lot of effort in it, and what we get afterwards is a nice summary. So a summary about updates, for example, just give an example here from the summary from October about EU projects, or for example, like HIT CF, where people can contact the coordinating center, or for example, updates what to do about new research coordinators, about GCP courses. So it's really helpful information what is going on within the network. I think the second most important thing being a part of this network is stability. Stability means, of course, clinical trials can last for many years and span around multiple sites and countries. And it's important for the investigators and the study teams to know each other, to exchange knowledge. And also, maybe if you work in the field of cystic fibrosis, it's good if your research coordinator can work in this field, and specifically in this field, and has not to perform 10, 20 other disease entity studies, so that they can really focus on cystic fibrosis. And so in the context of stability, also staff is important. And within the network can support the study sites with special grants, like it has happened with the ARC grant, a grant from the American Cystic Fibrosis Foundation, and also provided by the ECFS CTN, so that we can, as a study site, we can afford a study coordinator what is 100% dedicated to cystic fibrosis. This is very important for me as a PI and also for the study team. So what is also very important for us is standardization. Of course, it's not always only important that our patients are safe within the clinical trials. It's also important that we provide good data quality. And so standardization within the clinical trials network assures good data quality. And there are many standardization SUPs, as you can see here, about inflammatory markers. I just want to focus here: INO and nasal PD or ICM, sweat chloride testing, respiratory functions. And what was very helpful for our center was that we got teaching by the Royal Brompton group of Jane Davis. Claire Saunders came to our center and taught us how to use the new lung clearance index device. Certificates are provided so that we feel safe, and also the pharmaceutical companies feel safe to run trials within our network. So I think that is a really helpful tool. Sometimes it's also a burden, but so now having the certificate, I would say it's a really helpful tool. Simplicity means that we have it's easier for us to manage and to deal with clinical trials. You have to imagine when a pharmaceutical comes to you with a specific protocol, you have to read this protocol, you have to be very much involved in this field, and sometimes you feel you don't have time for it. So it really makes sense that we have those teams already presented by Leven, that we have the protocol review teams, that we have quality seals by an expert committee, that we get by Fiona, as Silke has mentioned, a very honest feedback about our study performance. So our network can create more knowledge. Yeah, it's great, and it's also very great because of this fruitful meeting. So there is a European Cystic Fibrosis Clinical Trial Network meeting together with the Cystic Fibrosis Conference, but also in the beginning of the year, there is a CTN meeting where all those investigators can take part. But it's not all about investigators, as you can see here on this picture. It is also about the whole study team. So our research coordinators want to be a part of CF. They want to live this research team, and so they visit these annual meetings where they get a specific training, where they get updates on studies, where they can talk about specific problems. And I am very happy to run this training committee together with Sabine Michel from Utrecht. And I think getting the feedback, the meetings are fruitful, and the whole study team benefits from it. So to summarize, so I really think a CF team depends and consists of many parts, as you can see here. But the ECFS clinical trial network is a part of our CF team, helping us with clinical trials. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Olaf. I completely agree with you and with your enthusiasm. I share your feelings and what you said. I think it's the network created a great sense of community, and of course we know each other better because we meet each other every 6 months, and so we know exactly who we need to ask when we have a specific question on a specific outcome measure or something. You know, we really know each other better. I think also that, as the network, the academics gained a united voice, and we are active stakeholders in industry-sponsored clinical research, and you know, it's really it becomes more balanced because we have a say in the matter. We could, you know, we had some problems for enrollment, which was really not fair, for too quick and it was a rush and really difficult. So we could put our foot down and discuss with the sponsor, because we were so as a group we were really powerful, and they had to listen to us. So we have one question. Is Olaf talking about pharmacy-sponsored trials or also about self-initiated research?
So I am talking about pharmaceutical-sponsored trials. Of course, there may be also investigator-initiated trials run within this network, but mainly I have been talking about pharmaceutical trials.
Yes, we'll hear about the investigator-initiated trials with the next talk, and with the success and challenges. There are some sort of investigator-initiated trials with the new EU contracts, EU funding. But on the whole, it has been very difficult, and we'll discuss this with Chris, to have investigator-initiated trials in the network because of different reasons. So we are mostly running industry-sponsored trials. Any other question? So thank you very much, Olaf, and thank you for your enthusiasm. And we'll move to our last talk with Chris. She'll summarize the successes and challenges of the network. So Chris, I will invite you. Here we are. Chris?
I can't seem to, yeah, I want to move my slide, but it's not going, so I'm not sure how come. Let me see, let me try again. Yes, should work now. Okie dokie. Sorry for that. The first thing I would like to say to the people who are online and considering starting a network, don't be disappointed or don't be put off by when you hear all these different activities we have now. We really started small and grew. So if you go at it and start small and grow, it's really possible to get into full action and activities. I will be short on the successes because that's not what you want to hear. I think you mainly want to hear about the challenges. Now, the successes, we really realized a steady growth. We grew in number of sites. We grew in number of countries. We now have a really large population available for participation in clinical trials. Also, our staff grew, but if you hear all the activities that are being done, it's amazing that we can do that with only about four full-time equivalents. The number of trials in the network has grown and is now sort of steady between 15 to 20. And I really have to thank our coordinator team. They have done a superb job. They love their job. They're very good at it. And they really are high performance. Without this coordinating team, we can really not do that. And you now see how big and how well spread across Europe our network is. It's really something that we're very proud of. We gained expertise. We really learned a new job. And that translates itself by companies asking us to agree that it's important that we get involved in trial design earlier. We learned as to protocol review that it's not only the doctor who can give good input, it's also the research coordinator, it's the patient or the parent, it's the statistician. We really need a full team to do that properly. We now do study feasibility assessment, and compared to the ones done by the clinical research organizations, ours are really much more realistic. We do influence the final protocol, so we really have an important job in this protocol review. Our standardization committee is very successful. We now have standard operating procedures for every single parameter, and we also have central reading so that the quality is even increasing. Investment in software development was a difficult pill to sort of swallow initially, but it did gain, is now associated with higher efficiency. So we have that for the protocol review and also for the trial management system that Silke reported on, and the quality assessment. So really, when time goes on, you have to invest in certain specific items, it will pay back. We gained popularity. We really are known by pharma, and this clinical trials network is now a must for CF studies in Europe. CF care sites are also very eager to be part of the network, even though the financial repercussion on that is quite small. The clinical trials network is also a core member of the EMPREMA, which is a European network of pediatric research coordinated by the European Medicines Agency. So we really are often a model. Now, challenges. Our network has become bigger, so the increasing complexity of communication with all these sites is not negligible. Composite sites that say they work together very well but have patients in different locations, they are a real challenge. I would not advise you to go that way from the start unless you really, really, really have to. Likewise, centers who do not respond to requests take up a lot of coordinator time, and often they are also low performing sites. So at some point in time, you have to decide, is it wise to continue with a particular site? And now after 10 years, as you could hear from the quality assessment reported on by Silke, it is a common decision by the site and CTN that they really don't have a role to play within the network. A difficult issue is also that pharma has a preference for Western Europe. The North and the South and the East are less recruited, so it's really still the clinical research organization that really drives, together with the company, the site selection. We are still struggling to get a real handle on that, or to really motivate them to go to the less explored. Starting an investigator-initiated trial is a complex thing. First of all, you need an enormous amount of money to run a clinical trial independently. And number two, registration process of trial differs in every different country. So the regulatory aspects of that are very, very complex. It's only now that we are a well-established network that we will be embarking on major investigator-initiated clinical trials. And that is also thanks to very good financing from the Horizon 2020, and the HIT-CF project is one of these examples. We are a European network, but in Europe there's at least 26 different languages, and although most of the medics are relatively proficient in English, the paramedical staff is not always so proficient in English, and if it is training, they have to sort of overcome an initial shyness. And even with some PIs, their confidence to lead would depend on how fluent they are in expressing themselves in English. But there I can only say, if there's good people within the network, try to motivate them to step forward. Practice makes perfect. Also for the patients, you need to go into translations, but all of that can be done with enthusiastic co-workers, and often also with the help of the patient organization themselves. Bringing new medicines to patients faster. That was our ambitious goal. Over time, and especially with expensive treatments, we realized that we as a network have unfortunately no impact on drug cost. It is the company that sets the drug price. Hence, we really work very hard to bring new medicines to licensing faster. And that's, of course, the first step. But we realize that licensing and access to medicines is not the same thing. So that's work in progress. But with a strategic plan, we even hope to have sort of some input there. And the last challenge I want to mention is it's not so easy to become financially sustainable and independent. By independent, I mean we don't want to work just for one or work with just one pharmaceutical company. We really want the income to be diverse and from as many partners as possible. And the income that we generate is really from protocol review and from feasibility assessment. Also, when it's a small startup, these fees are quite low. When it's a small startup, it's obvious we cannot charge high amounts or the progress would not be there at all. So we have to be realistic and realize that our income is limited. We are certain that by now we have an enormous impact on the quality of the data generated, but that does not necessarily come with a higher income. There is no structural EU funding for networks. There is the ERN, but even that gets very limited funding, but the sites that do the work don't get any structural funding, and also the central network, the coordinating center, does not get any European funding. And also when there's EU proposals, number one, they're not all accepted, but the preparation of such a research proposal also takes a lot of time from the coordinating side. The coordinator, the CTN is very much lacked as a partner in whatever project comes through the CF field nowadays with EU funding, but the preparation time is very, very big, and the financial return for the network specifically is not always very big. So these are the challenges I want to share with you, but maybe you have other questions. Thank you for your attention again.
Chris, thank you very much. Really, you summed up very well and very clearly, and I think very candidly, the challenges we face. So thank you very much. We have one question, which is, are you considering the enlargement of the network towards Central and Eastern Europe?
That is a yes. And we do have sites already in the East, like the Czech Republic, which is doing really, really well. One of the criteria that we set out to select networks is how sites for the network is, however, that you had to be able to work according to current standards of care for CF. And that is at times a bit of a problem for centers really in the East. And that is the reason why the network is more Western Europe, North and South, but why Eastern centers have a harder time to join the network. We do realize it is also a bit unfair towards the patients, because patients from these countries will have less opportunity to participate in clinical trials. On the other hand, there is still niches of clinical trials that we can drive to that area. For instance, Pseudomonas aeruginosa colonization in patients with CF has become quite limited in children with CF, although in the East, that condition still exists and more patients are still chronically colonized with Pseudomonas. So certain trials, certain very specific trials that are requested by EMA could go to Eastern countries and could be happening without the network even, because it has never been our ambition to have a monopoly on clinical trials for CF in Europe. We really wanted to boost clinical trials.
There is another question, which is, are there certain countries where gaining approval to participate in multinational trials are more difficult due to country-specific ethical laws or regulatory issues? And how does CTN overcome this to try and include these countries?
That's an interesting question. The ethics approval, we have had a situation where ethics approval different in countries. For instance, in our current era of CFTR modulator therapy, one of the countries had a problem that if it is uncertain that because of the high cost, the medicine would not be available to the patients if the trial results are positive, well, then it would be unfair to participate in the trial. That's sort of an example I can give of a difficulty in a specific country. Other than that, no sort of example comes to my mind.
Yes, we should probably stress that we are not acting as a CRO, really. So this kind of issues are more the CRO's issues and not really CTN's issues. What do you think, Chris? I think...
Yeah, probably. But that part, why they go to a specific country, although we really try to get a handle on it, they never give the real answer, or not. They don't give all the answer or the entire answer. It's usually just out of habit, I think.
Yes, I don't know. Maybe it has changed because we've been directors of the CTN quite a while ago now. So, Silk, are you still there? Maybe you can add something, but maybe the CTN has more say now in the matter, but at the time, really, we could not, they didn't ask us really which countries we would recommend, or it was really the sponsor and the CRO. When they had the approval to run within the network, they mostly chose their sites and their countries. So it's quite it was a bit frustrating.
Yeah, Isabel, I don't know if you can hear me. It's still mostly the same situation, although sometimes we can try to direct the sponsors to a special country, showing them that there's extraordinary capacity because they are looking for special inclusion criteria. So sometimes it works, but in general, it's really the decision of the sponsor.
Thank you. Any other question? So just to summarize or to end on a note, as we've said, we've presented over 2 hours the network. We are very proud of what we've achieved. It's a lot of work done by a great team. The coordinator, the team is absolutely great and very efficient, but also investigators at sites, research coordinators at the different sites participated to build this network, to write the SOPs, to help in training and so on. So and to help for protocol reviews, of course. So it's really a teamwork. And now that we've presented this to you, it's a 10-year work, and you might be daunted or it might be daunting, as Chris said. So I think that you should remember that it's possible to start, and to start small. I would say that the key elements needed to launch a CTN, and Chris and Silk and the others, Lieven and Olaf, you may correct me, of course, but I would say that the key elements needed to launch a CTN is that, first, of course, you have to assess feasibility and to be sure that there is capacity and commitment of a sufficient number of sites to work together and undertake clinical research. You need to have investigators. Sites, it's good, but it's also persons, so you need to have investigators willing to adhere to the code of conduct and to give some time to the networks committees. You need to have at least the funding for a sustainable coordinating center. Otherwise, I don't think it would work. It's really absolutely critical to have a full-time coordinator at the beginning. Even if you start small, the coordinator is really pivotal. And of course, you need to have a minimal number of industry-sponsored studies in the pipeline, or industry-sponsored studies, but they need to be funded. It's quite difficult. So that's what I would say. Maybe you want to add something, Chris, Silk, Lieven, or Olaf?
No, I think you really summed it very nicely up. Thanks.
So if there is no more question and no more comment, I would like to thank all our speakers. Thank you very much for showing the CTN in this very lively light and showing what we all achieved. And I would like to thank you for all attending this webinar. I hope you gained some information from it. If you want to start a CTN, we are here, so you can easily reach us. We are very happy to share our procedures, and this webinar has been recorded, so it will be available. And I think that's it. So thank you all, and I wish you a good day. Bye.